it's our priority to establish and maintain good relations with all of our neighbors, because especially in the field of economy, because our economic development depends on the quality of our links and networks with, first and foremost, with the neighbors. Moreover, our multi-ethnic society is reflected in our cultural...
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kohen-Hodzic. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear Mr. Kilic, Mr. Akan, dear colleagues, it's a special pleasure to be here, of course, among such an outstanding audience. I would like at the beginning to emphasize that the Peace Island Institute deserves a particular credit, I think, for organizing this debate on the Balkans, and this series of debates, actually, here in New York at this point in time. Because as we experienced, especially us diplomats, but I am pretty sure a lot of you share this experience, the Balkans is slowly slipping from the international political agenda, or at least, let's say, from the top of the international political agenda, and it's becoming more and more a regional, which means basically an EU issue or EU and NATO issue. And this is, I think, mostly for good. And this has been emphasized also by my colleagues. Because this means that our region has come from a long way from the time of wars, genocides, ethnic cleansing, to the time when the major issue in the political agenda is meeting the standards for the EU membership process. So the impression is that the term Balkanization, which has been depicted very well by my colleague and friend Goce, and which basically denotes a process of violent disintegration along ethnic lines, has left the space to the term Europeanization, or let's say Balkanization through de-Balkanization to Europeanization, or a concept which in our lenses, in our perspective, means the process of integration through embracing and preserving the standards of, I mean, the integration to the European Union, of course, standards of democracy and market economy. So during the last, let's say, decade, basically, in our region, the major point of reference for measuring the progress towards the successful political and socio-economic transformation, if you want, have become the progress reports that the EU Commission issues every October for all countries. So the changes are huge. But the points of departure, I would say, for all countries of our region are not the same. We all have undergone or are passing through a transition, but not the same one or equivalent one. I refer here mostly to the countries from the Balkans which have once lived under communism, which are covered by this panel. The common ground of transformation for all countries in our region is a transition from a monist political system to a pluralist democracy, and from state-controlled to a market-based economy. So this is the common denominator for transition for all our countries. But beyond this, some countries have gone through additional layers of transition, namely from post-conflict or post-war, from a war to post-war societies, and from pre-independent to independent political status. Countries which once were part of the communist Yugoslavia fall into this group. The Republic of Kosovo falls into this group too. So we had to pass, or we are passing through three-fold transition, which means first from communism to democracy, second from war-torn to a post-war society, and third from pre-independent to independent political status. As we all know, the Republic of Kosovo is the youngest among the 7 independent countries which have been created at the ashes of what was once called communist Yugoslavia. So basically, Kosovo has been created as a state at the process of, or as a result of dissolution of one state, not secession from any country, as sometimes there is a wrong impression on this. It's a crucial difference. As we all know, our journey of freedom and independence was difficult and painful, actually. But where do we stand today? Actually, just as a coincidence that not part of conspiracy because I served in Turkey, but we just celebrated the 6th anniversary of our independence just last week. so the timing of the panel is coincidental. During these six years as independent state, Kosovo has demonstrated vision, capacity, and commitment to embrace and enhance the standards of democracy, multi-ethnicity, human rights, and market economy. With our policy of very good neighborly relations, and with our strong, loyal Euro-Atlantic inclination, Kosovo has become a pillar of peace and stability in our region. With 106 UN member states recognizing our independence up to this point, and with others expected to join soon, we are also taking our place in the family of the independent and sovereign nations. So this is in brief where Kosovo stands today. Where do we want to go? This is more important. As an old saying goes, people cannot work for the future that they cannot imagine. I will try to briefly summarize our vision and approach to the process of the Europeanization of Kosovo and of our region. The Euro-Atlantic integration for Kosovo is a national, paramount, I would say, national aspiration. And accordingly, it's the major foreign policy objective of our country. And in our perspective, this entails primarily membership into two organizations, into NATO and the European Union. So, although as we all know, NATO and the EU are two independent regional organizations, for us, they represent two pillars of the same Euro-Atlantic umbrella. I shall emphasize at the outset that Kosovo is in the initial stage of a formal relations with the European Union. In October 2013, we have started negotiations for the stabilization and association agreement, and we expect this process to be completed within the first half of this year. This marks basically the commencement of the contractual relation between the Republic of Kosovo and the European Union, because as we all know, the EU launches the stabilization and association agreement processes and agreements only with the independent countries. We have also in 2012 launched a visa liberalization process, and we hope that this will be completed also without a further delay. We have also something which is called structured dialogue on the rule of law with the European Union. And finally, in 2008, the European Union has launched a mission which is the biggest EU mission on the rule of law called EULEX, and it has been actually done after following a formal invitation from our country and also a decision from the European Council. Now, why Balkans need Euro-Atlantic vision? It has been explained very well by the previous speakers. I will mention 4 general reasons why I think the process of integration in the EU and Euro-Atlantic structures for Kosovo and our region is, I think, indispensable. First, geographically and socio-culturally, we are part of Europe. Despite the fact that, as we all know, we have had a non-linear geopolitical, let's say, and socio-cultural trajectory in our history, as compared to the history of Central and Eastern Europe, and Western Europe, of course. But still, the European Union is the common political and socio-economic house of the European nations. And as a member of that family, we should not be left out. So this is the first basic reason why I think the Euro-Atlantic vision is without alternative for Kosovo and for our region. Second, the Euro-Atlantic umbrella is the strongest guarantor of peace and stability in our region. Perhaps we have defeated the evils of the past, but I think too much triumphalism would be a bit premature. Evils of the past have not disappeared entirely from our region. We still notice the presence of political tendencies which are based sometimes on ethnic exclusion and nationalism. We still see in some parts of our region tendencies to solve ethnic differences based on territory-based approach, as opposed to citizens-based approach. Most obviously, we see this tendencies in the northern Kosovo and in some parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina. At this point, it is important to underline that the vision of the Republic of Kosovo is based on inclusiveness, inter-ethnic existence, and harmony. which are the core European parameters to manage social-cultural heterogeneity. We have adopted incomparably high standards or advanced standards for the protection of ethnic minorities, particularly for the Serb minority in Kosovo, and we are happy to see that this has progressively led to the steady integration of the Kosovar Serbs into the public life of the Republic of Kosovo. The holding of the local elections last November, for those who follow the developments there, was just an indication of the successful, or of the products of this policy of inclusiveness along the ethnic lines. On the other hand, in 2012, as it has been mentioned, we have started a dialogue with Serbia with the facilitation of the European Union to normalize neighborly relations. We cannot change many things. Obviously, one of the things which we cannot change is history. As we all know, as we all might recall, Kosovo, the people of Kosovo have suffered a lot under occupation and oppression for many years and decades. Yet there is another thing we cannot change too, and that is geography. So we cannot change the fact that Kosovo and Serbia will be there as a neighboring countries forever. And having in mind this, and also inspired by the European idea, Kosovo has started a dialogue with the Republic of Serbia in 2011 with the facilitation of the European Union. So the European Union is again a framework, an indispensable framework for normalization of relations between our two countries. We are committed to this process. This process has produced a lot of results. It has been much more, let's say, productive than many would have just thought 2 or 3 years ago. And we hope that the other side will move along the same line, so demonstrating commitment and determination in this process. But what I wanted to underline is my second argument why the EU is without alternative. So the Euro-Atlantic umbrella is indispensable not only for social and economic prosperity, as it is commonly assumed, but also for peace and stability in our region. It is the strongest receipt against the evils of the past, which have caused a lot of pain and suffering in our region. Having said that, I don't want in any way to depict a pessimistic picture about our region, because that would be an incorrect depiction. Actually, that would not reflect the truth, because I think the political situation in our region is better than any time in many decades in terms of the peace, stability, and regional cooperation, as it has been underlined by the other speakers before me. But as a famous theoretician in international relations, Ola Weber, once famously said, "The other for Europe is its past." Once we firmly reach that point in our region, then the other for us is not our neighbor, but our past, then we can be a bit more maybe relieved or comforted. The third reason why the EU is indispensable has been also mentioned, is its transformative power. As it has been said, meeting the EU standards for the aspirant countries requires significant political and economic reforms, which improve the good governance, advance the democratic standards, the human rights, the economic well-being, and so on. So by making these necessary reforms, the countries of our region basically serve better to their citizens, while making these reforms which are a requirement for the EU membership process. And this is the third reason why I think the EU membership process is without alternative. And the fourth reason has to do with the globalized world we live in, which Mr. Aras has mentioned in the beginning, in the opening speech. So we live, deepening of integration and increasing interdependence at the very let's say, layered levels is the defining feature of the globalized world we live in. So as a small countries with limited demographic and economic capacities, integration into bigger markets and the bigger social political structures is a sine qua non condition. EU represents a global actor which is assuming also increasingly active political role. So it's becoming also increasingly an important global political actor. And having said that, the EU represents for us, for the countries, for the small countries in our region, a strong platform for catching up successfully with the global trends, be they economic or technological or the other. Now, how successful the EU enlargement towards the Western Balkans will be, it's a different story, of course. Again, this issue has been addressed. This will ultimately depend from the political will and socio-economic capacities of our societies, but also it will depend from the political and economic developments within the EU. We have to do our homework, which are not easy, and the list of homework starts with a good neighborhood policy. Governments in our region should take the lead, as they are doing, and I think they are doing this successfully in this endeavor. The former Stability Pact, which is now called the Regional Cooperation Council, to which Kosovo became member last year, is one of the important instruments through which the EU and Balkans interact with each other. The Stability Pact has been launched with the initiative of the EU in 1999, and that marked the month when the war in Kosovo ended, basically. And in 2008, this has been transformed into something which is called Regional Cooperation Council. And again, 2008 is the year when Kosovo gained its independence, so it's an interesting coincidence again. But apart from the RCC, there are other regional mechanisms, such as the Southeast Economic Cooperation Process, which, create the necessary framework for the for the cooperation in the region, which is the backbone, let's say, of the European integration process. So we have to go to EU by making our region truly European. This is one way ticket for us, and this is to the benefit of everybody. So I will stop here and will welcome your questions and comments.
Mr. Bekim, also I want to express my apologies for forgetting to congratulate you on your day of independence. I had it in mind, but somehow it skipped my mind. And now I would like to open the podium for any questions that the audience may have for our panelists.
I'm glad to be here today. I am not a politician, not a diplomat. I am one survivor from big genocide against Albanians in Chamria in 1944.
1944.
Now, as I heard by the diplomats, I like what Mr. Gos Karayanis spoke. He said that in the vocabulary, a new vocabulary is written hostile states. Yes. They are right for something. Because, maybe you don't know, Greece and Albania are in war. Greece, 74 years ago, in 1940, when Italy started the war against Greece from Albania, and they still have in power the war law. How is possible that they are both members of the NATO?
And still at war.
Still at war.
Are you still
So,
at war?
this is the reason. This is the reason that the diplomats, they are covering this, hiding. But Mr. Gos Karayano spoke clearly. We are very tied together because the mother of great Alexander was from southern Albania, from Molosis. The mother, and we are relatives with Bekim Sejdiu, we are brothers, it's another thing. But we are good relatives and we understand each other because the Greece is the only country that they don't want that Macedonia to name Macedonia. This is their Macedonian, and they have nothing to do with Alexander Big, because after Alexander we have Skanderbeg, the big Skanderbeg, and this is the reason to understand, please, how to explain. They are in war and they are
Okay, so that's the question. How
in
come?
NATO.
So I think this is a question for our Albanian ambassador. The question is, I think it was a little bit long comment, but the question is, how come Albania and Greece are still officially at war and the members of NATO?
Well, I wish I had the liberty to be free as well, not a diplomat, not a politician, and to really speak my mind. And if that were the case, I would have certainly a lot to say.
Yeah.
But being the representative of my country who has a policy line, I would say that without contradicting anything what the gentleman said, yes, there is a part of history of Albanians that is really not clarified. There is crimes have been committed against Albanians in Greece. This is one of the problems that we have and we are dealing with Greece. History teaches us what has happened. History teaches us lessons, but history cannot always only lead. We need to take stock of reality. We need to see where we live, where we are, what we want to achieve, and what is the best way to achieve. The question of Chameria is one of the questions that we, when I say we Albania, are discussing openly with the Greek government. It's far from being one of the most easy ones. I can't say that we have advanced a lot in this dossier, but it is there. It has to be properly treated, and I'm sure Albania and Albanians, be they politicians or diplomats, will do their utmost and their best to advance in that issue, like in other issues. It's not the only problem we have with Greece. There are other problems we have with Greece as well, but we try to discuss them in a most civilized way. We try to consider them the civilized disagreements we have, so that we can really achieve as much as we can on that dossier, like in other important and very crucial aspects as well. Yes, it's true. There is the law of war with Albania that was declared during the Second World War is still there, formally. This is something that we have repeatedly asked the Greek government to deal with. There is no sense, there is no reason, and there is no justification for that law to be there. The response we get from our Greek partners is that, well, it's just a relic of history, it has no meaning, we are members of NATO, no one can even believe to think that something of a kind of war can happen between the two countries. Nevertheless, we think that since that relic has no sense, it has to be abrogated, and we're working on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We learned something.
Beside the few hats that I would wear on behalf of my clients here, I would only wear my hat, which is editor-in-chief of Publica Press, and that's all, and obviously senior diplomatic correspondent at the United Nations. My questions for all of you is, how do you see the region of Balkans in 10, 15, or even 20 years, whatever is easier to you to answer? And for Aras Bey as well, since you are here, how do you see whether the Turkey is going to be in European Union in that period of time?
Thank you very much. So we'll start with our panelists from left to right.
Starting with Turkey would be better, but well, of course, it's not easy to predict where our region would be in 10-15 years. We would like to believe that it would be much better than today, because today is much better than it has been 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It will depend, the developments in our region historically have depended from coincidence of two-dimensional dynamics. So the dynamics inside and the interferences from outside. Historically, sometimes the interferences from outside have been negative. We are very lucky that since, let's say, the collapse of communism, the interference or the spirit, let's say, which is coming from outside, if we want to put it a bit more philosophical, is positive. So it's leading, as we said in the beginning, it's leading our region through profound transformations, which are positive for our region. So the outside structures, I don't want to call them organizations or states or empires historically, are not coming to our region with their political agendas, which only fit to their national objectives or political objectives. So if we judge it from today's perspective, then of course we have all the reason to be optimistic. I just recently, as a coincidence, read, because you know there is this 100th anniversary of the First World War, and the big events are going to take place, as far as I know, in Sarajevo. And you must know better this, Errol and Mr. Aras, but there was a commentator in one of the medias in our region about, perhaps you are familiar with the name Norman Angeli, who wrote a book called Great Illusion, which said that the world has become so much interdependent that it's unthinkable actually to think about the war. But you know, he wrote that book in 1909, so 5 years before the First World War. Although then he justified, he said, I mean, I'm just speaking about the economic rationales. So, I mean, we have to, this means that we have to be cautious also. We have to be cautious, but we have reasons to be optimistic. So this would be my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for predicting the future. It's not always easy. Thank you for the question. I pretty much agree with Mr. Sejdiu about his remarks during, related to the future of the Balkans. Speaking as a diplomat, I'm always confined by some frontiers that I should follow. But as I said previously in my remarks, we should first abandon Balkan stubbornness. In fact, a lot of things have improved since the 90s. We are no longer in war. Virtually, we sit on the same table. We speak openly about the things. I will give you the example about Macedonian-Greek relations. We are engaged in the process for nearly 20 years. We speak with them openly about everything. We can't find common language still, but that does not mean that we should cease to speak and debate and exchange views about the relations. So that's I suppose is the most important thing. Not to stop talking to each other, because if we stop talking to each other, then other people will start talking in different means probably, and we very well know that the Balkans is still very vulnerable to different kind of nationalism, extremism, and so on. Another problem is the economy of the Balkan states. We should pretty much focus on the economy because that's what's bring us together. A lot of countries experience difficulties. Our unemployment rates are still very high. For instance, in Macedonia it's around 29–30%. I don't know about Kosovo and Albania. But if we focus our energy on economy rather than politics and putting obstacles to each other, then I'm pretty sure that the region has some very positive perspective in future. That's why I appeal to cooperation on infrastructure projects, building roads, building bridges between the different peoples. If we focus on that, then we have a future. If don't, then everything is possible. So, thank you very much.
I think most of it has been said, and I agree with previous speakers. But I would say, who would have really dared to imagine that in 2000 the region would be what it was after a decade of war and destruction and misery? Who would have really guessed that a decade later we would have had such a transformed region, that Kosovo would have been independent and accepted widely, largely in the world? So I would say that, well, betting in the future is not really our speciality, but taking stock of what has happened, I see my country a member of the European Union in 10 years' time, and I see the whole region, if not completely integrated, on the verge of being integrated, which will absolutely and profoundly and definitively transform everything in our part, and we will not be called anymore Balkans or Balkanization, but just Europe.
Thank you for painting that beautiful picture. I guess it's wonderful, and in 10 years' time, I think the question was also addressed to me, and it's with regards to Turkey, and I'm not sure that I'm the best expert in that, but I know that in 1991, 1992, I was in Belgrade, young man, and there was this huge propaganda on TV, and it was all war propaganda. There were bad words which were preceding then the bad deeds. And I said to my dad, I said, if I was a village boy in Serbia, I would be the first one to go to Kosovo and kill these Albanians. Because that's how the impression was, the impression was made. It was just psychological preparation of the whole nation. Every day we would hear about attempted rapes of Serbian nuns in Kosovo. And then when you went to the statistics of it, you found that the least number of rapes in the world, and especially in Europe, is in Kosovo. But the impression that we were getting in Belgrade was that this is happening on a daily basis there. And there was only one, I remember, interracial, what you call interracial rape, and that was of a Serbian guy raping an Albanian woman. But besides that point, I want to say this, that good words precede good deeds. I think this sort of panel is giving a hope. We have heard very beautiful words from Bulgarian ambassador, from every one of these people. We heard positive words. And I also believe that we are not also aware enough of the phenomenon of this information revolution, the Facebook and the internet, and information which is spread around right now through these means. I don't think that war in '92 would be possible with the Facebook today. We had huge demonstrations. Actually, Serbian students were demonstrating against the war. I was in the middle of those demonstrations. Serbian students were demonstrating in the middle of Belgrade against the war because they were the educated part of the country. Because they had somehow this information, the true information. But right now, when the information is spreading so fast, I believe that we are going to be globalized, that Mr. Hoxha mentioned that there is a prejudice about Albania. Albania is not being accepted because of this prejudice. It's still a medieval thinking which happens in Europe. But this is going to die, I hope, with the spread of information. And that goes also for Turkey. Turkey may be a harder case, but I think it will go as well for Turkey. Actually, the things are shifting. As you can see in the economy, Turkey is becoming a big economy power. And I believe that at one stage, Europeans will beg Turkey to be part of the European Union if things go as they've gone these last 10 years. Okay, now we had this lady. She wanted to ask a question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Actually, you have made my task easier. Preempted what I was about to ask.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not wearing any hat. I don't use hat. I'm a former director from the Department for Disarmament Affairs in the United Nations. Have visited Albania several times. Have worked very closely with.
What's your name?
Swadesh Rana.
Swadesh Rana.
My point of departure is your last comment, Mr. Chairman. The world that we are today is not going to be the same in 10 years. I have never seen such a transformation of international relations in such a short period of time as is taking place today. That's the only comment I want to make, and I'm fascinated by the refreshing debate. The question will be to all of you, sir. Compliments to the Peace Island Institute. I can understand the lure of the NATO, European Union, Atlantic umbrella. But look at the three models this umbrella is offering to the old members like England, United Kingdom, to maybe a possible aspirant like Ukraine, and those who are on the waiting list. Allow me to list quickly those three models. As one of the oldest members, UK is putting conditions of staying within EU. As a model that has not been built, Ms. Ashton maybe was in touch with the Peace Island Institute, as her statement on behalf of the European Union came to Ukraine today. If you guys are looking for $32 billion, go to the International Monetary Fund. If you are going to be more trouble than what you are in, we will not interfere. Well, we encourage you to have the trouble, but we are not going to interfere. I suspect somewhere down the road they are going to say, if you need further political assistance, good governance, go to peacekeeping, peace building peacemaking to the United Nations. So you have a model for an old member of the EU, you have a model for a possible aspirant, and you have the, shall we say, guarded misgivings and the expectations of the Balkan states. My question to all of you, sir, is there a possibility that those who are waiting are aspirants, especially from the Balkans and from the former Soviet republics? Is there any possibility that they use their geostrategic significance to Europe as a bargaining tool to get some changes in European Union itself? It's a very resilient political institution, but thanks for listening to me. I would very much want your comments.
Thank you. Is there a blackmailing mechanism to get us into European Union then? Or shall we start from geopolitical?
Thank you very much for your comments and for the question. Well, I'm even more blessed. Thank you very much. Well, you worked in disarmament, which means in strategic, a lot of strategic thinking and where the world is going, where it should go. Are we really leading the world in that direction? Your questions are very complex, and of course there will be another session to deal with those very important issues. I cannot speak for the European Union. I mean, the one that was here is not here. I spoke too early to say that I would respond on his behalf. But what I would say is that if you look at the relationship that we had with the European Union in '92, it is pretty much the same, the relationship that the EU has with what they call the Eastern partners, either Azerbaijan or Armenia or other countries. So it took us a lot of time to really get closer to the EU, and all that was a little bit of a homework. So we needed to do our homework. We understood what needed to be done. We thought we were able to do that in a shorter time, but then all the way things are being added. And one important thing as well is that mistakes or failures of others become our own homework. I will not mention any country, but there have been difficulties, and those difficulties add to the complexity of our task. For us, as we said, there is no alternative because we do not want any alternative, because we do not seek any alternative, and we think that what we wish for, what we desire, what we really think that we deserve is really by joining the European Union, by becoming part of that union, which itself is far from being perfect. It has to develop. It has a lot of problems, but that union has always developed out of problems, out of crisis, because they have understood how to solve the crisis and go a little bit higher. So it's a cyclic development, always at a higher level, and we hope we'll be at one level on that. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to contribute?
Thank you very much for your comments. I'd say that it's always been a priority of my country since its independence in 1991 to become a fully fledged member of the EU and NATO. And that was the major foreign policy strategy of every single government of the Republic of Macedonia so far. It has been supported and is still supported by the majority of Macedonian population, regardless of origin, Albanian, Macedonian, Muslim, Christian. So that support is around 90%. So there is no other single alternative. So we are dedicated to the process. We are negotiating. We've been negotiating since the year 2000. So we are facing with a lot of obstacles, as I've mentioned, but that does not mean that we should give up and try seeking another alternative. So that's why we are obliged by the will of our people to continue pushing forward our European agenda. So that would be my answer.
Well, not a particular comment, basically, because well, I mentioned in my speech the 4 reasons why I think that project if I can call it like that, Euro-Atlantic expansion is a indispensable. Of course, speaking about the EU is a standard, and whoever wants to join the club has to embrace the standard. Of course, there is a feeling sometimes in Europe that things might move a bit quickly or quicker, but still it's a fair play. Taking into account the way the EU works, which is, again, they are speaking about on behalf of the EU, but I mean, it's a complex system, and everybody in the EU agrees with that. It's a consensual organization with its own issues and so on and so forth. I think what we have to do is to concentrate in doing our homework, and that's the best way. Even if we want to persuade the EU to change its dynamics, the best way to do that, or to give the argument, is if we meet the criteria.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please. You are first, and then. No, you are first. Huh? Were you the first? Or I thought I saw you for your hand first.
Hello, my name is Uka Jambal. I am an Albanian activist here from New York. I salute the Peace Island Institute for bringing the Balkan nation here together and speaking about the peace in the Balkans. Mr. Ferit Hoxha was studying in Bulgaria before the war. I was studying in Zagreb University, international relations of former Yugoslavia. I know he spoke at that time more about the nations surrounding former Yugoslavia rather than what's going on inside, boiling, the pot of boiling of nationalism in former Yugoslavia. And that's reminding the same thing here. These gentlemen from these governments speak more about peace with the nations, but unfortunately they don't speak a little bit more about how they treat the citizens, minorities in their countries. So my direct question is to General Council of Macedonia. Mr. Council, lately the Macedonian government is talking, I will quote, historically redirection of water flow of river Radika, taking the water from Albanian villages, cities, for the industrial purpose of Macedonia. So I'm quite sure that's going to cause a civil unrest and maybe a civil war, because 40% of Albanians in Macedonia will not allow Macedonian government of redirecting the historical flow of river for the industrial purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm not an expert on that kind of particular matters. As to my knowledge, nothing has been started yet. Everything is being discussed openly with all of our partners in the region, with Albania, with Kosovo. So far, no significant steps have been done towards building that project you mentioned. So I may be not the right person to address this question. I can get in touch with you for more details later if you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Now, our next question was from you, sir.
And having us here. As an AP World History teacher and Model United Nations Club Advisor at Brooklyn Amity School, I find intergovernmental agencies such as the United Nations, FEBA, and other important Balkan and Turkic organizations invaluable to our globalized community. Brooklyn Amity is an esteemed private school in New York that offers students with challenges and opportunities to ensure that our future generations acquire the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in our highly competitive world. Our students consist of many diverse backgrounds, and they come from countries such as Albania, Kosovo, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Morocco, Turkey, Macedonia, Lebanon, and also American students. My students here today feel especially lucky to have the opportunity because of their high levels of interest in the role of government and politics in our interconnected world. As members of our school's Model United Nations team, they will get the chance to take on the role of delegates representing Albania in the National High School Model United Nations Conference next week. Therefore, they are very enthusiastic about further understanding the political, economic, social, and cultural aspects of the Balkan states so that they may do these great powers justice while seeking feasible resolutions in an effort to create a more peaceful and prosperous world.
Thank you. Thank you. So was that just a comment, or is there a question at the end?
Honestly, I really want to give our students an opportunity to ask.
Week, in effect, here in New York, there is a big festival called Vienna Comes to New York. Now, it happens to be 100 years since the First World War broke out, June 28th, the shooting in Sarajevo.
Yes.
My question is, what if? First, looking at the panel, the 4 countries or states sitting here today, and the 4 that were in the past, what is missing is Slovenia and Austria. Now, my question is a what-if question. What if that shooting would not have happened in Sarajevo, and Balkanization wouldn't have become the word? The Austrian Empire under the emperor would have perhaps survived. How do you see the world in a situation that all that would not have happened?
Wow. Wow, if there was no shooting in Sarajevo, I think with respect to Slovenia, Slovenia is a Balkan country. Austria, I'm not sure, so it's a Balkan panel. And I remember when we were inviting, we did FEBA, my organization did Balkan Leaders Summit several years in a row, and Slovenia turned up only once. We always invited Slovenia. It was not that we were biased against Slovenia. Serbia never came, and that was the only time which never came, and it was because of Kosovo, which was always there. And so that's another problem. But the rest of the countries we did invite, and they did attend. So, so does anybody want to answer this question? Or do you know how to answer this question?
Would be very much delighted to have Austria in our club, of course. It's been the eyes of Europe towards the Balkans for many centuries. Well, it's very, again, from a personal perspective, it's a, or academic if you want, it's a very hypothetical question, but there is this a group of historians who think that it has, that war was accidental, basically. So a lot of countries were dragged into the conflict, not because they were planning, but you know, it was a domino effect type of thing. So it, now, of course, again, it would sound speculative, but it was a war maybe which could have been avoided. You know, this is at least what historians say, and I'm not speaking about as an official now, as a diplomat. And of course, not easy to let's say speculate how the world would look like. But one thing, of course, it's obvious is that it caused a tremendous cost to all our region and to the countries who were involved. And then, of course, at least partially, it was also, at least this is what historians say, that was one of the reasons for the Second World War also. So, I mean, but again, at the academic level, a lot of you might know this much better than me maybe, but there are different camps of historians when it comes to the interpretation of the causes of the First World War, and then could that have been avoided or not. And there is a strong tendency to think that that was, for a lot of countries, it was actually an accidental war, not a very well planned, let's say, prepared war, and so on and so forth. So the episode, the chronology we all know, I don't want to get involved into that. I mean, the trigger and so on. So.
One more comment, and then
I will try to add to your disappointment. 19th century until the Second World War has been all that time the only game in town was war everywhere between different countries, different national arrangements that have been. After the Second World War, we have a completely different trend. It's decolonization. It's dismemberment of whatever the arrangement that were, and that process is almost finished now. And if we see how many countries have been created between 45 and the present day, we see that the trend was really to go very locally national. So. Of course, I have no answer. I don't know what would have happened if the incident in Sarajevo would not have occurred. But I would say that following the historical trend, it would have been very difficult for the Austro-Hungarian Empire to continue to exist, although we were very happy with it.
Thank you very much. You want to get someone?
Just a short comment. I'll try to answer your question by asking a question. Do you think that the Balkan countries at that time could have stopped what was cooking in the European centers, European capitals, in the beginning of the 20th century?
Thank you.
Back a few years ago, I wrote a thesis that a united Europe can be created only after division of existing states. See, I also think that Catalonia should be a state and the Scottish should have a state and so on. And only then we can get to a united Europe.
Okay.
And
so we first have to start the Balkanization process of defragmenting people. Okay, thank you very much. That's valid thesis, I guess.
I think my question was, I want to thank the panel for covering integration to the European Union. You talked about the political cohesiveness that the diplomats, the governments are working together, keeping the communication open. I would like to touch upon for sustainable socio-economic development, trade patterns and also import-export is important. For example, just to give an example of Turkey, Turkey had 45% of its export-import to European Union and other 45% with Russia and other Russian republics. But now, Turkey wants to diversify its export and import to have a sustainable economic stability within the country. So I would like to know from your country, what are your export-import partners? Who do you have export-import within the Balkan nations? So yeah, trade patterns.
Okay, so.
Well, in the last 2 decades, a lot has been done, as it was mentioned extensively, in forging relations between different countries. Of course, when stability allowed that, and a lot has been achieved, but still, at least for Albania, the main trading partner, import-export, is the European Union, mainly Italy and Greece, but also Austria. France, it depends on what the content of the basket. It's little the region, for reasons that we know, that sometimes investment and trade, they need a very stabilized climate to really develop and flourish, because you don't invest a lot of money if you are in uncertainty. But I think now we are at times where anything can be justified. And we have better roads networks that link our countries. We have better, and we have, I think, a more, if not unified, a more converging energy thinking in the region. People are going freely from one country to another, so all this will certainly favor a better trade. But still, the main partner, because it's a big market for Albania, remains the European Union.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Quite the same as Albania. Our biggest trade partner is the European Union, Germany in particular. Then comes Kosovo, Serbia, and the rest of the world. But I agree with you that the trade volume within the Balkan region is not as it should be. So we should. That's why I was talking about forging or fostering the bilateral economic relations between the Balkan states, rather than focusing only on political matters, discussing the history, the past, and everything else. So we should focus pretty much on economy, because that's what brings us together, opens different realities for everybody in the region. So if we mean business, then we can look into the future. But if we dwell into the past, then we will impose obstacles on each other, because there is an old saying that goes that we in the Balkans are either relatives or enemies. So
I think we might be both. I mean, if you look at the genetics, really, I mean, it turns out that we are relatives. I mean, when you look at the DNA genome project, you don't see that, where the border between Macedonia and Albania stops, that where the gene stops. It's not
That's
the case.
true.
So we are relatives, and unfortunately, sometimes enemies. So please.
statistics. That's why I brought some written notes about export-import, like the main export partners of Kosovo, and just mentioning them: Italy, Albania, Macedonia, Switzerland, Germany, China, Turkey, Serbia, Slovenia. The main import partners: Macedonia, Germany, Serbia, Turkey, China, Italy, Albania, Slovenia. So the region and the EU basically is the most important trade partner, economic partner we want.
All right, thank you. So it's time now for the closing remarks. I think if our ambassadors have time to stay a little bit and chit-chat with our students, that would be nice. But on the other hand, I would like to thank Peace Islands primarily for organizing this. I think if we think about peace, the communication and this sort of panels are the way to go. I also thank Amity College for bringing the students, because youth exchanges, and youth is the one who is going to carry, if any peace process, they are the ones who are going to carry this on. I thank our panelists, starting with our ambassador from Albania, ambassador from the general consuls from Macedonia and Kosovo. And I thank you all for participating. Thank you very much.